Hello, everybody. We are live. And let me know in the chat if you were vibing like us backstage on all that fun music. That was so much fun. Anyways, so today is day 2 of our live events for the launch studio, of the studio launch that we just did yesterday. And so it's all about the developer experience. And so today we have 3 speakers, all from Hygraph. And so, if you have any questions about what they're talking about, or you have comments, whatever, put them in the chat so we can grab those, filter them out, and talk about whatever you have to say in the Q&A, so you can actually influence what we talk about here today. And so now that I'm at the subject of the chat, please put in there, where are you based and what's the weather like? Because for me, it's the south of France. It was super nice outside today. Like I even have like a bit of red on my face because it's already hot. I'm not sure this is supposed to happen right now. It feels like it's still winter. Anyways, so if you have any other questions that feel like more like an offline thing, or you have comments, or you have feedback on the new studio, because maybe you've used the studio already, feel free to join us on Slack. It's slack@hygraph.com in our community, and actually give us all the feedback. And so this is all out of the way. Let's now kick it off with our first speaker. And our first speaker is Alexey. And I'm looking at
Hello,
your
team.
last name. I'm going to, shall I attempt it? I'm just going to
Oh
say
yeah,
it.
absolutely.
We're going to go for it. And then you're going to just give me whatever it really is. And then also you can just take over and say what you do and what you're going to talk about. And then we just go for it. All right. So let me just read it.
All right, go ahead.
We're going to, okay. Alexey, oh no, Orlovskiy.
Yeah, it's pretty
Almost.
close. It's very close. Originally, the R is pronounced, so it's Alexey Orlovskiy,
All right.
but
There you go.
you've been very close.
Close.
Also, the jury's still out on how to pronounce Alexey in English, but I go with the most common one, but generally introduce myself just as Alex.
That works.
All right.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
done a
And
lot of MC gigs where I try to guess people's names, and it's always hard. Anyways, so you are a product manager, and so you know what? I'm just going to give you your screen share and get out of the way, and you can start talking to us about all the lovely stuff you've been working on recently.
all right. Yeah, thank you. My pleasure to be here with all of you today and finally be able to talk on what our team was working on for the last half a year and even more. But before we go into that, I want to give you just a little bit of context. And as you all know, Hygraph is not a new product, and it was founded back in 2017 as a Graph CMS, as a first ever GraphQL native headless CMS, and been steadily developed over time. But we always wanted to be more than just a CMS, and there was a vision for the future of content, for content federation. And in 2022, a couple of years ago, it was rebranded into Hygraph, which is what we are today. And with this one, the new challenges have also appeared, because to deliver on promise of the future of content, we realized that we need to invest heavily in our platform, in our infrastructure, and being able to scale faster, deliver higher quality features, deliver it faster, and just make sure that we can support what we have promised. And with that, several projects were born. 2 of those I'm going to talk with you today about. It's the Hygraph Studio, the big name of this week, and it's also regional management server. And let's get straight into it. And regional management server is something that been released a month ago, roughly. And if you live outside of Central Europe, you have probably experienced the benefits of it. And let's dive straight in. Here you can see our old classic Hygraph architecture. And we always had distributed content. We always had it, regional distributed content servers. And wherever you are, if you're in Sao Paulo, the content sits right next to you. But the management server was always global. It was always located in Frankfurt, and it held all your project metadata, your account, your projects, and most importantly, your schema and the structure of your content. You might not think that it's a big deal, right? You don't change content, change the schema that much. You don't manage your account that often. You mostly work with content, but it's not that easy. Anytime you open your content entry, anytime you do anything in Hygraph UI, you need to pull up your schema structure. So it still goes to the management server to retrieve the structure, to retrieve the schema itself. So no matter where you are in the world, the UI was always sending request back to Frankfurt, which always did increase latency. If you were in Australia or in Brazil, you felt that the latency is there. And also, whenever the busy region wakes up, you do feel it in your performance. So what we did, obviously, we changed the deployments for our management server. We made sure that management server is now regional. It now sits in the same place where your content is. So if you're in Tokyo, everything is local now. Your content is in Tokyo. Your schema is in Tokyo. Everything's there. The latency is much lower. In the data, we see up to 10x increase in performance, and it just feels great to work with your content when you are outside of Central Europe. Also, now you don't really care if when US wakes up, because your servers are isolated and you don't get this noise neighbor effect. Obviously, we did keep some of the functions global. Your account, your list of projects you have access to, your applications within Hygraph, it's all still managed globally. It's still all managed in one central server, but there are much less requests in there. The use cases are less frequent, so you don't get any latency or any problems with your usual workflows. Obviously, with this kind of project, we had a lot of challenges, because now when you clone the project, you can clone it between the regions. We need to handle that. We need to make sure that all the data is synchronized. We need to make sure that you have all the data about the projects you have access to, even though those projects may be in different regions. So all the consistency issues that you might think of in distributed systems, we did face many of them. If you want to hear a bit more on the details of this, make sure to tune in on March 27th, where our engineers will be talking a little deeper into the challenges we faced along the way. So yeah, second big project is the Hygraph Studio, the big name of this week. And as I said, we realized that we need to invest heavily into our platform, and part of it was rebuilding the UI, because we needed to make sure that we can onboard our engineers quicker, we can deliver on the new content federation features, and we can deliver on the new vision. And this required us to move much faster than we did before, and to scale much faster than we did before. So we went for a full rebuild. We switched to server-side rendering first approach. We went to the remix, and now, even before, Hygraph was an SPA, single-page application. Now it's a proper full-stack application. And what you see now in the beta is just the tip of the iceberg. Most of the work was done under the hood. We did work a lot on security, on observability, on testability, and just the platform feels so much better. And we already see the impact of it in how fast we can deliver new features and new pieces of code on this new platform. So hopefully you will also see it soon with how quickly we will introduce new features and introduce new things to the beta. But obviously, we didn't just work with the existing things. We did sneak up a few quality of life upgrades. First is command menu. Now, for all of you who prefer working with a keyboard, who don't like using the mouse to navigate, it's all for you. You can now just use Command K like you do in Notion or any other product you love. And we are going to continue introducing new actions to it to make sure that you can do most of the things you do in Hygraph just with a keyboard. We did upgrade the flow for schema management, for field creation and updating. It does feel much smoother now. It has less risk of losing data when you click outside of the window, or it's just more natural for the platform. And we are also expanding on our content federation capabilities with adding all out for remote sources. Now it's just 2 predefined vendors, but we are continuing working on it. And sometime you will be able to create custom all out configuration for your remote sources, for your custom services that you need to connect to. And yeah, now with this in mind, let's go and take a quick look on how it looks in the product itself. So you see here, it is our Hygraph Studio, and this is the great starter developed by team. You can always see it when you create new project. It's one of the available starters. And first thing I want to show you is the new flow for enumerations. So now you have display names, you have API IDs. Before we just had the values. So let's do categories, and we'll have, and with this one, and we will also add the contour. And we did update the flow. It's now it doesn't require you multiple actions to add the enum, so much smoother now. Now with the more interesting is the schema itself. So now what I want to show you is, as we go to the proper full stack application, everything is a root. So if you take a look at the classic web app, when you try to add the field, nothing is changed here. We just have the action. But now in the studio, when we do the new field, you can see the action happens here. You can see it in the URL. So everything we do, everything is a root. Everything is reflected there. It helps us maintain it much easier. It helps us separate the concerns much easier, and just generally much more convenient to work with. So we do the category, and we do the enumeration, and we edit. And here it is. And also, we can always say category. Oh yes, we did not add enumerations here. I'm sorry for that. But as I said, we can go to content now and see. Here's the content for the same model, and we can just go back and go back to model and go back to editing the model. We have also upgraded our API playground to a newer version of GraphQL. That's a library that you probably know if you're working with GraphQL. And this just let us clean up the implementation and just upgrade to the latest version. And we will continue to monitor the progress on this one and continue to implement new features on the playground, because we have some big plans for the playground as well. So yeah, this is what I wanted to show you today. Thank you, team.
Thank you so much, Alexey. And it's lovely to learn how much you know about skincare. Just making an enumeration like that, knowing all the things, that's awesome. If you have any questions for Alexey, feel free to put them in the chat. And then after all the talks, we'll put like a little panel together with all the speakers, and then we'll go in. I'm actually penning down a bunch of questions myself now, seeing these conversations. So if you wanted to know a lot more in depth about certain features that we built and how Remix helped us doing this like full stack app and the performance and stuff, and on the 27th, so next week, we have a panel discussion where we go like real deep dive on all the tech. So if you wanted to know like what kind of functionality we used without sharing our IP, obviously, you will see a lot about that then. And anyways, outside of that, on to our next speaker, which is Fabian. I'm going to put him on the stage here. And so, Fabian, you are employee number 2 at Hygraph. Like, exactly. We feel like you know everything. When I started, I could just ask you a question and it was always there. So how does it feel to know everything about Hygraph?
I think it's a curse and a blessing. It's pretty nice. Like, I mean, it always gets you talking with new people, right? There's always something you chat about. There's probably more that I forgot now than I remember. So that's also, yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, and it will, like, when you talk about something that was a little bit older and it went away, it will come back soon because you lived through all the changes in the product and name changes, all the things. And so without further ado, I won't go deeper into this. We have a Q&A session after this where we can talk all about your whole history. Go for it. Let me just put your stuff on the screen and let's talk about some asset management.
Thank you, Tim. All right, as Alexey just shared earlier with Hygraph Studio, I want to showcase 2 additional projects that we have worked on in the last couple of months to improve our performance and reliability, and 2 other aspects of the system as well. First up here, I want to start talking about Hygraph Asset Management. What I'm referring to here is our asset system that we use in the backend to deliver assets, but also handle uploading here. You might have seen in the last couple of weeks that we launched this new asset system for new projects in Hygraph. So if you now go into Studio or even Classic and create a new project, you will be able to try this out and give it a spin. When you can use it on your existing projects, we'll talk a bit about later. To get started, I want to dive a bit into performance and what we changed here. With assets, caching is pretty straightforward, and we can keep cached assets for quite a while. But there's also the portion when you request new assets and specifically do transformations to resize them, etc. What we did here now is looking specifically at asset transformation and the initial request duration. As you can see before, with, in this case, a 2 megabyte sized image that we first resized, compressed, and then converted to a WebP, all in the same transformation chain, we were able to cut that down from roughly 1.2 seconds to just below 700 milliseconds. One additional thing that I'm super proud of that the team was able to accomplish is the in-project performance. So if you're a user of cloning, so you clone your project or you do environment clones, which is pretty useful if you have more sophisticated development workflows, we were able to decrease this by quite a lot. So if you're looking at a project that roughly has 10,000 of assets, we were able to, from extreme cases like up to 80 minutes, cut that down to just a couple of minutes. If you have roughly 1,000 assets in your project, that is now down to just under a minute. So pretty nice what the team was able to accomplish here. Next up, I want to talk about a new way of uploading with this new asset system. All of the uploading handling is now part of our native GraphQL API. So for developers, this will be a nice change to just use the same API for everything. There's 2 more things that you can do here. So first of all, you can upload an asset via its URL. On the bottom right, you can see an example with, for example, an image from Unsplash. But there's also the way of using a file upload, for example, a local file. If you choose to do that, you'll send a similar request just with an empty data object, and you will get back a pre-signed URL, some additional parameters, and then you can send the asset to our system. Next up, I want to talk a bit more about the asset URLs and what we did to improve them. Similar to what Alexey mentioned a bit earlier with the regional management server, we also opted to go for a regional asset format here, to everything in one region in place. The assets will still be delivered globally through a CDN, so they're fast everywhere. We also, while changing the asset URL, went to do it a bit more SEO friendly. So if you want to, you can now optionally include the file name plus the extension at the end of the URL. One thing we didn't change is the URL transformation. So if you used them before and resized images, you can still do that the same as before. And speaking about that, there's also a few things we did here to improve. So besides keeping the resize and output transformations, we also introduced a bunch more that will be super useful for anyone using that transformation. First up, we introduced auto image. This one will allow you to specify that if your client sends an accept header, we either return a WebP or an AWIF image or a fallback JPEG. So you can always get the best image source for your client. There's also crop options now. You can compress images, you can change the quality. There's border, sharpen, and also lastly blur, which could be super helpful for lazy loading. What we did for resize, it's exactly the same as before. You can resize it different width, different heights, and also do a cropping in the same run. For output, what we've done is for now, we will support every sort of MIME type for images. So if you have a PNG, you will be able to convert it to JPEG the other way around. And also one exciting change that we roll out in the next couple of days is AWIF support. So if you have existing images in the new asset system, you will be able to convert them to AWIF and also the other way around. Lastly, for this project, I want to talk a bit about timelines. So as we mentioned earlier, beginning of March, we launched this for new projects created in Hygraph. And our plan is in the next couple of months to provide some migration tooling for existing projects. So you can start going ahead, switch your existing projects to the new system. Around end of Q3, we will start kicking off some automatic migration, so to get everyone involved. But don't worry, we'll also send out reminders for this way in advance, so you know when it's happening and can prepare. And then lastly, the thing here, the final part will be sunsetting our legacy application, which we currently roughly plan for Q1 of next year. As the last project, I want to dive a bit into our high performance endpoint. If you used Hygraph before, you probably know that we have two available content endpoints. The first one is our regular content API, and then we have the high performance endpoint. The main difference between both of these is that the caching and the granularity of the caching is a bit different. With the content API endpoint, whenever you do a schema or content change, the whole cache will be invalidated. With our high performance endpoint, we are much more granular, and today we also want to share some updates for that. The baseline invalidation for this high performance endpoint is happening on a model and a stage level. What that means is that if you send a query that is, for example, asking for blog posts, we would also cache that query specifically, and only if you make changes to the blog post model, that cached query will be invalidated. We also take the stage into account. So if you do updates, we will only invalidate things that ask for draft. And if you do a publish, the same for the publish stage. One thing that we're introducing here is a new entry level granularity. And our first iteration will be about requesting individual entries by its ID. So on the bottom right, you can see an example of how that would look like for requesting a specific post by its ID. What we will be doing here under the hood is making sure that this specific query, once it's sent and cached, will only be invalidated if you actually make a change to this specific blog post. So if you change any other blog post entry, this will not be invalidated. This will be rolled out in the next couple of weeks as well. One benefit that you get from using this high performance endpoint, and I would highly encourage everyone to try it out if you haven't yet. You can find it in the settings of your project under endpoints. You will get much faster response times in your applications because the cache ratio will be so much higher. That's it from my side for today. If you have any questions, we can talk about it later in the QA, but you can also reach me in our Slack channel or via email. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Fabian. That was awesome. Nothing gets me more excited than doing stuff with assets. Like, I'm an images geek. It's in the chat somewhere that people even attest to me being a bigger geek about images than them. So Fabian, beware for my questions. Let's see if we go too deep or not. So for our next speaker, we have Romina. And Romina is in charge of our documentation. And so,
Hello,
Romina,
Tim.
talk to me about the fact that you were a college professor for 10 years and now you write documentation. Is teaching the same, but just a different outcome? How does that work?
There is a lot that comes from teaching that you use in technical writing, because in technical writing, you're still pretty much an educator. So you have to think about how other people learn, which is not all the same for all people. So you need to think about different ways of presenting the knowledge that you need to pass on so that they can learn it. Otherwise, it's useless.
Exactly.
So it's
Anyway.
not that much different.
Okay, so it's not that different. That's good to know. Teaching is hard no matter what, I imagine.
Teaching is hard.
Yeah.
But it's also very beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also taking a responsibility on you for people that learn. Anyways, this goes a bit far, but look, we have some solidarity here, you from technical writers, because yes.
Thank you, Sarah.
this is a serious job. Without further ado, I'll put your slides on the screen and you can kick off.
Okay, well, hello, everyone. Tim did a wonderful job at introducing me, so I won't do that. And I'm here to talk to you today about our documentation. During beta, our documentation is going to live in two different places. First of all, you will continue, of course, to be able to access the Hygraph Classic documentation through search engines when you're looking for information from our website, and of course, the tooltips that we have inside the Classic app. But also, we have launched a new documentation project for Hygraph Studio. During beta, this documentation is going to be accessible through the link that we're sharing here. This is my right now. And also through the tooltips inside the Studio app, we have selected some strategic links that you can access from there to help you on your journey. Also, well, our documentation, beta documentation, you could call it, very much beta because it will be following development. meaning we will make sure that it is constantly updated and that it contains all the latest updates and additions to the studio. So whenever you're using the studio and you have a question, make sure to move over to our documentation to see if we can help you there. Now, this documentation covers basically everything Hygraph, meaning all the features that are supported by the studio. They have had their documentation updated, but also all the new features have been fully documented, right? Whenever you access, however, a document that covers a feature or a subject that is not currently supported by the studio, you will find at the top of the document that there is a call out. And this call out will let you know that the feature is not currently supported, and will give you a link to quick instructions on how to switch up so that you continue working on the app with the feature. If you are looking for a quick way to compare feature availability in both Classic and Studio, we have that for you as well. In the documentation, the Studio documentation homepage, you will have a pale button that links you to a comparison view document of both apps. There you can quickly see what is available for both, one or the other. If you've managed to see that something is available in Studio but not in Classic, that means it's one of our new features, for example, the command menu or the field outline. And if you see that something is available in Classic and not in Studio, that means our team is still working to make it available in both as soon as possible. This document will also be constantly updated. We will make sure that all Studio changes are there. So we can assure you that every time you check that document, you will have the current information on feature availability. And we have one more update regarding the documentation. We're extremely excited about the Studio, but we're also very excited about this. Especially my team and myself. We have used this time to not only work on updating information to make it current to Studio, but also on improving the experience regarding our documentation. So if you look at docs in Classic and Studio, you will see that they're a little different. We have listened to our community and we have structured information in a way that makes the project easier to navigate. We acknowledge that this is a fairly large documentation project, so it needs to be easy to navigate. And we've also made structural changes to ensure that information can be easily found, right? Whether you are using the search, whether you are navigating the documentation project, looking at the main navigation or the nested menus that we've designed for you, or if you are looking for a specific piece of information inside a document, we got you covered. Also, we have added new guides that you have been asking for, like our brand new implementation guides that are available in the Studio Docs right now. And this change of technology to our docs has made it possible for us not to just make our documentation more approachable, but also to be able to hopefully very, very soon make our documentation more interactive, which is something we have wanted to do for a very long time. And well, my presentation is very short because I just want to make sure that you find the information when you need the information. So save this link for later. And if you have any comments or if you have any feedback on the documentation, please make sure to remember that this improved user experience in our docs is an ongoing piece of work that we're actually on. So whatever feedback you can give us, please head over to our community. We'll be very happy to receive it.
Just going to put everybody on the screen here.
Yeah.
I was removing your slides and Angie, our colleague, put them back on because we were both very eager to get things organized. Anyways, thank you so much for all your talks. I'm just going to have a quick peek through our comments because there's not that many questions, which means you presented really well. Know this. This is very important to know. Let's have a look if there's anything specific that we can directly grab from the chat, and we can. Actually, this one is for you, Romina. What do you mean by making documentation more interactive?
Oh, I like this one. Thanks, Mario. Okay, so I will explain this with an example that I think it's fairly easy to understand. Today, we have a lot of developers who look into our documentation that are very experienced developers, but that are not necessarily GraphQL developers. So they go into our documentation on queries to look at how they are structured and to see how they can work with that in their projects. And now they can have example queries where they can see how it is structured, and they can copy it. They can go back to the project, go to the API playground, paste it there, adjust to their schema, and run it to see how it works. Is that helpful? Yes. Could that be more interactive and educational? Yes. So what we're looking into is making it so users can run queries directly from our documentation and maybe do some modifications there and try them out there, so that we don't add unnecessary steps in the middle between them seeing the example and being able to actually understand it.
Right. Thanks for that. So I'm going to quickly go into one of the other comments here that is actually for Fabian. Can I transform a PDF to a thumbnail? I was thinking, how is he going to answer that one?
That's a fantastic question. Yeah, we actually can. Also with the new asset system, Romina did a fantastic job on including also a nice table on documentation where you can actually see which file formats you can convert to which. So that's also a part of it where you can make sure that if you have any assets, you can also use that.
Yeah, we're like currently in a support role for Emily here. I know, Emily, you're on Slack, so let's chat a bit later about the error message you found. So I have one for me to Alexey, because you were talking about like our regional management server, right? And so we actually use that management server, even if you don't know, a lot as users, right? When you see your schema, when you're logging in, changing accounts, there's actually a lot of stuff that's happening there. And so you mentioned something about noisy neighbors. And I know a few of our tech folks here will know what that is, but maybe not everyone. So could you explain a little bit what you meant by that?
Yeah, what I meant is, anytime you do anything in UI, anytime you do anything with your schema, you query that management server, and this is one central server, like in Frankfurt data center. But then, so everyone from all over the world, all the requests coming into this one, and when the region, the more active, the busier region does wake up, it does take a lot of bandwidth. So people from that region start to query the server a lot. And if there are too many of them, the capacity doesn't scale that fast. And then if you are, let's say, in Eastern Europe, where there are less users, you still feel, even though there are less users on your region, you still feel that performance not issues, but you still feel that in the performance that there are a lot of queries into the server just because the time is not convenient for you.
Exactly. All right. And so with that in mind, can you talk about, like, are there certain features in this management server that are still global, or is everything fully regional? Like I'm in France, it's always like next to me in Paris, for example.
So we did keep a little things global, because it was not worth it to go through all the hoops to solve the consistency for them. One of them is just account management. You only need this data when you're on that list of projects, the initial page on the application, also the list of project itself, the application management for those of you who do custom apps. So all of those are still global, but it's everything that you see on that project list screen. That's why we call it directory app, is that is your project directory. And whenever you go into the project, you're a local. Yeah, you're there. Nothing affects you. It's all good.
All right. Let's see. I'm just looking at the chat here, and I have a question I don't know. And I think, Fabian, you probably know. Let me try and find it here. So, will the new set be available to a list of components from Elvar?
That's a good question. I think for this specific one, not yet. If I might not be mistaken, but I also need to check a bit later. But I don't think it will be available just yet. No.
All right, we'll keep you posted. If you come to Slack, you will see all our product updates, and you will keep you posted for that one. Let's see. So I'm actually being pinged by my colleague. There's something about our playground that we have a question from Emily again. I cannot find it in the chat here, but is there a way that we can save our queries that we've done before in the playground? And I use that myself all the time. In my session, it's there, but then I come back next time and it's gone. Will we have that?
Yes, we don't have it yet, but I do plan to make Playground into proper developer feature rather than just the playground. We do plan the query saving and also the query sharing first within the project, so you can also collaborate with your colleagues when you need to write query for them and then send it to them. You don't need to use any messengers, so you can just save it in the project, and anyone in the project will be able to reuse that. So we do have plans to expand the capabilities of API Playground to make sure that it is a proper developer tool to help you develop and help you push your projects to life.
That's cool. That's really cool. So this one is for Romina. I actually have this one prepped here. So can you explain like the different learning paths that we set up for the docs?
Yeah, actually, we have several. There's a little bit for everyone in there. If you are new to Hygraph, if you're a baby Hygrapher, we have a really complete getting started flow for you, where you get to know some of the fundamentals, some of us as a company, and then you get to go through the steps of creating a project all the way through to connecting it to a front end. And it's a really nice project to start with because it gives you a complete view of what you can do with Hygraph. We use a lot of our field types there and a lot of our structure. So it's an actually really nice project to follow. It's also kind of like a follow your own adventure because depending on your level of knowledge, you can do the whole thing, or you can just clone part of the project and go right to query practice and mutations practice. If you are an experienced developer who is not that experienced with GraphQL, right? Then we also have the developer guides for our developer friends who want to use the UI. They cover everything UI. If you are a developer who does not use the UI, you also have our API reference. If you are an editor, of course, you're using the UI. You have the editor docs that get a lot of the noise out of the way by only showing you the things that you're going to see on the screen when you are under an editor role. But do give you some additional information for context. And there is one thing that is important to distinguish with our documentation, and it is that some of our documentation is more oriented towards you consulting when you have a doubt, and some other parts of our documentation are more oriented to you following a flow to learn something. Like you have the full tutorial for the getting started, and even for the app framework, you have one of those. But then the developer guides and the API reference is more for when you have a doubt and you just go there and you get the information you need.
Wow, there you go. That's a lot. That's good. Like everybody learns differently, right? So we have a pretty nerdy one, but before I'm asking this one is for Fabian. I had one myself that kind of fills this. This one can come after. So when we discussed like building this whole new asset system, my first question was, there are so many out there. Why not just white label it? Why roll your own? Can you talk a little bit about the considerations?
Sure, of course, yeah. So there's a whole bunch of things that come to mind here. We used a bit of a white label system earlier. There's the biggest thing for us was always reliability and making sure that we are in control of things that we're doing here. And for us specifically, the asset is always a key part of the product. So we're delivering assets, making sure that they're delivered properly, that we can upload them, that we can also feature some functionality around it that is helpful, right? So for us, that was a key decision in making sure, okay, we'll actually roll our own here. There's a bunch of tooling around it that helps us with that. So that was one of the key initiatives for us here. And to get to Ronaldo's question here, for now, for videos, this won't be possible, but it's something that we've heard in the past before. It wasn't possible with the solution we had before. So it's something we'll definitely consider also.
Awesome. So, Alexey, so you know a lot about the tech behind the studio and stuff, right? And so currently we're running the classic one and the studio side by side. that is, if you look at engineering things, that's kind of a feat on its own. Because you would tend to just say, I'm going to update this part, and at one point everything just works. So can you elaborate a little bit about how we did that? Why we did that? Was it maybe just due to our own history that we had to do it that way? Can you just talk us through that a little?
Yeah. So we, as I said before, we are a GraphQL native CMS, and also what does it mean that we use our own CMS to power things up? So for us, how it was structured was always we had this backend with a GraphQL API and the front end that does use that API, which means that when we are rebuilding the front end, we can also not touch the backend, and we can just build the new front end on the same APIs, which also lets us push it side by side. So just the decisions that we made at the start of the project made it possible. And when we decided that, yes, we will be running this side by side, we actually didn't need to do anything extra, just because the way we structured our work, the way we structured our project, and it just made it so simple to switch UI on top of the backend. And it's also through headless in a sense where if someone uses Hygraph, you may also not want to use our UI. You might want to build your own UI, but you still have this backend, this powerful API that just provides everything you need for CMS to function.
Yeah, you say that like it's simple, right? But actually using the CMS just by its APIs and not using their UI, I can count on one hand the CMSs that do that. And for us, that feels super native, and it just worked. So that's actually really cool. Anyways, something else. So this one is for Romina, and let me see if I have a banner for this one so people can read. Yes.
Okay.
Let me find it. Yeah, so if there are any changes coming to the studio beta, right, like lots of them are coming, obviously, what is the best way for people to actually know about these changes?
They should join
How
our
can they learn?
community.
There you go.
If they join our
I promise
community,
that
they will
wasn't a
have
CTA
access.
setup. I promise.
They will have access to all the information on the new additions. And also in the docs, we will have new tags next to every new document. But the community is best.
Thank you for that. I promise it wasn't the CTA setup, but it worked really well. So Fabian, can you talk a little bit about, like, you know what? I'll go with one of the questions I wrote down when you were presenting, because you were saying like we have this auto image thing, right? So you can figure out based on like a browser string or a header what type of image a user gets that's the most optimized. Do we take into account, and I'm not sure we have this, actually I'm not sure, I should know, but I'm asking the expert, right? Do we actually look at the image itself to see how much we can actually compress it, for example, and then based on that, choose a WebP or an AVIF or something?
So in this specific case for the auto image, it's essentially more about just converting it to a different file type. So depending on the exact header, right? So we'll take a look at what's in there. Depending on the browser, for example, Chrome will maybe like WebP a bit more. Others might like AVIF a bit more. So depending on that, it will be returned. And there's always the fallback to just the classic JPEG. So even older browsers will be able to support it. So you can just make sure that whatever client you're using, it gets the best image that it actually wants to display.
Exactly. And there's this lovely upgrade path for us there looking at, because certain images just work nicer when they're compressed into a WebP, even though the browser wants an AVIF. But that's like a few steps ahead. We're not essentially a product that does just that, right? So we do everything a little in that sense. So with that in mind, we're talking about transforming the image type, but there's also a bunch of different transforms we can do to these images, right? Cropping, making them smaller, filters, all those things. So can you talk a little bit about the ways a developer can use to make these transformations happen, like in code? What would be the
sure,
best?
Definitely. Of course, there's essentially two different options you can go with. So the first one is if you use our content API, whenever you request an asset entry, or if it's a relation to an asset field, you will have access to the URL field. And that URL field will have a specific parameter you can pass to it, which is for the transformation. So right there, you can decide if I'm requesting assets, what transformation do I want to? For example, every time I request an image, I always want to be a WebP, or I want to be it in a specific format. Maybe it needs to be a
Yeah.
square, right? So that's one
Exactly.
option. The other one is just using that URL and then yourself just putting in the transformations on your front end if you have specific ones, if they should be in a specific order, or maybe they're different depending on the page they're at, and you want to be in control more on the front end, what you can do. So these are the main options you can use.
Oh, that's awesome. Being an image geek myself, I tend to prefer to just query it once with GraphQL and then build the URL in context to where I want it. But I've also experimented because on the 26th next week, we're doing an asset management workshop where I'm actually building a website as we go, and people can just, dive in and ask me questions and try and work along with me, where I have prepared to do like GraphQL queries that get versions of images in the query. Like in one query, I would have one image with 5 different transformations, and that works extremely well. I've not really seen any CMSs do it that way, and that makes me super happy as a nerd and working here. How about that? That all works out. So let me see if there's anything left here. Maybe we can end with this bombshell of a question for Alexey. Let me find it here. Okay, I cannot find it because when I'm seeing, I cannot read. I'm just going to ask you. So
All right.
this is a big release, right? We did a ton of work with all these teams. How, as a product manager for this thing, do you figure out what is the definition of done for this first release? Angie, you found the question. Thank you. Like, where do
Yeah.
you draw the line in the sand and like, this is enough? This is what we call a beta. Like, talk a bit about the process, please.
Yeah. So I think the first part is you always want to get your product in the hands of users as early as humanly possible. Like the earliest, the better, because the highest quality product always is built on top of feedback. You want to start getting feedback as early as you can, as much feedback as you can. So this was one of the things we did consider. But then you have considerations. What is enough to push? Because if you just push an empty shell, we don't get any feedback. So there were 2 main criteria for this project. One is we don't break anything. So when whatever you are, whatever project you have, if you switch to Studio, you don't lose any data. We don't break anything. You still can switch back at any time. So making sure that we do not affect our users in any way. Like this probably was the most important one, just the safety of your data. And the second one is we still, to get some quality feedback, we still need to make sure that our beta version is sufficient for at least portion of our users to fulfill their day-to-day job. So for projects, we don't have localizations, let's say in the beta, but some projects, they do not have localizations. And we looked at all the features we had, and we figured out the percentage of the projects that would need to cover at minimum, and we went from there. So all the features that we have in the beta, there is a subset of users that it will be enough for them, and they will be able to use the Studio and actually feel it and experience the end-to-end flow in it. So yeah, that's just the main ones for this decision.
Thanks for that. So with all this, and I think the chat is dying down a little, I think this is a perfect natural stopping point for us. So thank you everyone for attending, for listening so intently, and to our speakers as well for presenting this and keeping it short, which is awesome because that's hard to do. I know I take space as an MC, that's how these things are complicated. So thanks for that. And so thank you for all the questions in the chat as well. And so tomorrow we are going to be looking at the editor experience inside the new studio. There's a ton of design and UX and research that went into that. And so we're going to have Daniel and Lo tomorrow talking about all that stuff. So make sure to sign up. And maybe I'll say it one last time. Join us on Slack if you have any questions or feedback. And also, something I haven't mentioned before, Hygraph's accounts are free. And you get a lot on that free account. I have a ton of projects that I'm doing, and I haven't there's no need to upgrade. There's a lot in there. So anyways, thank you everybody, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.